we were supposed to go to Thanksgiving too, and my wife became ill, and so she wasn't ill enough that I had to stay home. She's like, yeah, go hunting, have fun. So I go hunting that morning. Up comes a buck, 8-point buck. I shoot it, goes down, and I'm like, well, what do I do now?
You're listening to Classical Etc., a show from the Memoria Press Podcast Network, where we offer an in-depth look at the philosophy, culture, and heart of the Memoria Press family. Now, here's your host, Shane Saxon.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Shane Saxon. Today, I got a chance to sit down with Paul Schaeffer, the director of the Memoria Press Online Academy. Our conversation explored the apparent contradiction between Paul's first love, farming, and his vocation, directing a fully online classical school. I think you'll enjoy hearing how this seeming contradiction is precisely what makes him the right man for the job. Now here's our conversation.
And like we're rolling. Yes, all of this is already, yeah, I'm sure you probably were.
Better than Michelle, who asked if I would marry her the first question.
I'm definitely not going to ask you that question.
Okay, well, I'm glad to hear that.
Here, I'll put this here.
So, Paul,
I wore a stained shirt this morning, and
that's fine.
That fits
the farmer vibe.
That is actually true. So this stain, I have to, I don't know if you're actually starting here, but we're gonna.
Yeah, we're starting.
So 2 days ago, so my chore is to get out there before anybody else in the family, let the dog out who's been sleeping. She sleeps right outside the chicken coop, and put a training collar on her so we can control her because she's a puppy out of control.
Sure, Lindy.
That's right. And I walked out in a white shirt, a light khaki pants, and normally she's fine. She just sits right there. I put the collar on, out she goes, right? And that morning she had been in the middle of the night, I guess, been digging through the dirt, and so she comes right up on me, 2 front paws right there, and I.
And then you just put your tie on and came to work.
That is not what happened. My wife said, "Where are your coveralls? You're wearing those next time." Yes.
So, Paul, that really is what I want to talk to you about, is that you put on your coveralls in the morning because you're a farmer.
Mm-hmm. Well, aspiring. Let's
aspiring farmer.
Yes.
But would you say it's accurate to say your first love is farming?
First love is my wife.
So
however,
good to hear.
Maybe first passion, right? Yeah. So what I like to do is farm. Yeah. Farm and be outdoors, right? I mean, hunting goes in with that.
Fishing.
Yeah, and in fishing, anything I can do with my hands, really, but that provides for sustenance.
Okay, so you're a farmer. You're also all things tech here, and your actual vocation is director of a fully online classical school. Now, not me. But someone else might ask, that seems like a contradiction. I wouldn't say that. But if someone was here who did think that it's a contradiction to love farming, to work with your hands, and to also be a tech guru and really good as an online director, how would you answer them?
They're wrong. To be blunt, sometimes I like to be too blunt. Well, I think number one, it could come from a lot of different areas, right? It could be a stereotype of who a farmer is.
Yeah, farmers aren't good at technology, and they're not sophisticated, right, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, we like to, eat grass while we wear our overalls and sit there like a bump on the log, right? No, actually, farming, and this is actually one of the things that was most attractive when I started learning about farming, is the utter complexities of it, right? You actually, to do it successfully and be a true steward of the land, you have to know so much. You have to know about chemistry. You have to know about your soil health. I mean, even if you're doing animals, right? I grew up, I was homeschooled for a while, and my mother didn't want to teach science. So her thing was, she said to my dad, go start a garden. And that is actually what propelled me into farming. But as a kid, I hated it, hated every minute of it. And so when I started getting interested in farming, I was like, I want to go the animal route. I do not want to, I've picked too many weeds. I've harvested too many tomatoes. and I just don't want to deal with the plants. But then as you start learning about animals, you start realizing, oh, you have to worry about your plants because that's what your animals eat, right? And so there's a vast amount of knowledge that the farmer has to have. And I mean, you look back at the people that are giants in the educational world, or just in leading society prior to the 20th century. All of them knew about farming in some respect, right?
Yeah.
Because that's how we all live. Without farming, we all die, right? And there's the idea of leisure is the basis of culture and all of that, right? That if you're only focused on farming, then we don't have all of this all this other culture. But I also think that if farming is relegated to the bump on the log, all of us end up sicker, we end up poorer, we end up in a world that we're trapped in our own minds, and we don't get to get out and use our bodies and actually experience the world around us.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that point, have you felt as you've taken on these things, and you didn't grow up farming?
No, just the garden. I mean,
So as you've explored these things and learned more about animals and the farm life, have you felt like more life? I mean, how has it helped your health?
oh,
and
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. So I mean, I lived in town, right? Louisville, big town, it's big comparatively to where I live now. And so I'd wake up, I'd drag myself out of bed, I'd take a shower, I'd drive to work, I'd come home from work, and if I was lucky, I'd get to mow the lawn, right? But then I got married and my wife started doing that for me because she's so nice, but then I didn't get to go out and mow the lawn anymore, right? So what else was there for me to do with my hands, right? I could, fix a doorknob or clean the gutters, but most of the time I was sitting idle. It wasn't leisurely, it was idleness, right? And I was just exhausted, right? And fat. I mean, those people that remember me 6 years ago, right? A bunch of people came to the Memoria Press conference a couple years ago and they're like, did you lose a bunch of weight? Yeah, I lost like 40 pounds because I actually started taking my health seriously. But now, like, I get up because I got farm chores, but I don't begrudgingly get out of bed anymore. I'm like, great, I get to go see my chickens, right? And find out this morning that Lindy killed a chicken, right? I mean, she's supposed to be guarding the chickens, and that's just what happens. Right, but it made for an interesting morning.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So, and then when I come home, right, there's we have a nice dinner, and then what are we gonna do? Let's go make sure the chickens have their food. Let's go try to train Lindy. Let's go check on the bees. Let's prepare for the cows, right? I mean, we have lots of things that
Yeah.
we don't want to just do one thing. We want to do so many.
Yeah. So connected back then to classical education and the online school. I mean, you're talking about the life-giving power of not being idle, but all of your students and teachers are sitting at chairs. So how have you resolved that contradiction in your heart? You don't see it as a contradiction, I assume.
Wow. I did not see that one coming. Okay. Kids sitting in chairs versus me out on the farm. I do sit in a chair for a long time every day. I will make that clear. My first thought is our classes are an hour and a half for the week, right? So the student can sit there for an hour and a half, learn about American history, and go out on their porch swing and actually breathe fresh air while they study, right? While they read the book. I actually, driving into Hines Latin School today, there was a class out there, doing, I don't know what they were doing, but it was evidently class going on out in the grass. I know they do that rarely, but they do, fresh air is a very, very good thing. But also, right, it gives them flexibility for whatever their interests and passions are, right? So where my life has given me the flexibility where mornings and nights and weekends I can go and do what I want to do in the farming sphere, right? I think the online academy schedule, for one, gives students that kind of flexibility. But I think also farming is an industry. Well, it's an endeavor that feeds both mind and body, right? And so we in the Online Academy, we are seeking to absolutely form the mind, right, and feed the mind. And oftentimes we are also trying to make things bodily, and whether it's actually getting on the microphone in the class and talking, right? Whether it's writing and submitting, a written form. Some of our classes, like in math, they can't just type the numbers in and submit it. They have to actually write it on a piece of paper, scan it in, send it to us, which may seem antiquated.
But you guys are doing online differently.
Yeah, they've got to use their hands, right? And so all of that comes into a full human experience, I think. And Mrs. Strickland, you go into one of her Latin classes and she's playing, Latin chant as you come into the room, right? So you get this experience of beauty, right? And it's, if we did Latin class in a Gothic church, maybe there'd be even more beauty, right? So we do what we can. But I also think, see, I'm preempting your questions, hopefully. I have found that actually the majority of, and this is anecdotal, I don't have hard data, but I think the majority of Online Academy families are rural.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I found that interesting. I was talking to a mom in the Online Academy, and she started telling me that she thinks her son's going to grow up to be a farmer, and she was kind of apologetic about, well, I don't think he might not go to college. He probably is going to be, a gentleman farmer. And I was like, that is amazing. Let me tell you about my life. And I think, but she and I were on the same wavelength of, we want him to be liberally educated. He has to have the command of the liberal arts, because when you go try to price out a tractor and figure out, what am I getting for this? And, nobody in the agricultural sales business is comparing apples to apples, right? So you have to have the wherewithal to look through their rhetoric, look through their logic, figure out, what am I actually getting for this, right? As part of running an action, if you're going to be a farmer and you have to run this business, you have to understand all of that, right? And so I was like, great, I'm thrilled to prepare this gentleman farmer in high school and have him ready and prepared for whatever's thrown at him, right? Because the farmer isn't just brute force. The farmer is absolutely fully engaged mentally and bodily in a lot of ways in the world. Oh, there's...
And in that way, I mean, you kind of are doing that with Online Academy. You don't, like you said, the Gothic church could be a better environment for education, but you're using the tool of internet in the same way you're using the tool of your tractor or any of the other things that you've leveraged on the farm for your good and the good of your farm.
Yeah, what's the end goal, right? The end goal is that child, right? Mm-hmm. We want that child to be wise, and we want them to be virtuous. And I mean, to be completely frank, we are trying to form the virtue through what we're talking about in class and the discipline, but we actually have very little control over that formation of virtue because we are online, right? They're at home. We can't tell them to sit up or pay attention, right? We can't tell them to pay attention if they're not engaging, right? But they can turn us off, and we're off, right? We have no way to contact that person. And so, that for us is a deep partnership with the parents, but our absolute end goal is that child, right? So yeah, the online mechanism is a means for us and to reach people that don't have an opportunity for a classical school in their area, right? Here I am trying to produce high quality eggs for people in my area that don't have access to it, right? They can't raise the chickens, right? Or the high quality meat or whatever it is, because, you can go to the grocery store and you can get...
I didn't think you'd guilt trip me on the interview for not buying your eggs.
Well, we've established that you don't buy from friends. Then we established that we're not friends, so therefore you can buy from me. So I still don't know why you're not buying from me, except for the fact that I don't have eggs yet. Yes, next month. I should be having 5 dozen eggs a day. This is not a promotion for my farm. Please do not try to buy from me. So
going back to something you said earlier, going back to something you said earlier, you talked about how gardening was kind of an introduction into a body of knowledge that you hadn't had access to before. I've heard you kind of connect that with the way we teach science and the way you teach it in the online academy. Do you see kind of that experience of gardening in the out of doors, having our students observe things primarily in the middle school years? Are there connections there, or am I missing that?
Let me try to follow you here. So the gardening being sort of my entrance to farming in the same way as students learning about nature, the nature studies as their introduction to science.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everything, I guess I want to bring this back to, we are not spirits that have this body attached to us, and the body is horrible and the spirit's the good thing. No. We are incarnated beings, right? Our flesh is part of us. And so, if we study science in the abstract, right, it doesn't mean much, right? You can study the laws of physics, right? But unless you actually go out and you see a car crash into a steel pillar that doesn't move, all of a sudden the laws of physics mean something, right? And in the same way, I think, students starting with their nature studies, which, by the way, is something hopefully we're going to roll out in the Online Academy next year, because we don't have those lower school classes, right? And it's going to be a challenge to do that in an online format, right? And I have some teachers that are trying to think outside the box on that one. How do we do that? Because if I were physically present with those students, we would walk out. We'd study birds. I'd bring a chicken in and have the chicken strut around, and I might have to put a diaper on it because we're in a school building, and it's kind of unnatural, but people do it. That incarnated aspect of let's touch this thing, right? Those were things that we actually didn't have to do in school when everybody, had access to those things, right? Now, so many of our students haven't seen a pig in their lives, right? They have, the only outdoor wildlife they know of is the squirrel and the bird in their tree, right? And so, I feel that in some regard, if most of our students are rural and we, roll out nature studies, that may be a flop because, right? Because I tell parents all the time, if your kid goes frog gigging, in the afternoons, you may not need to study amphibians and reptiles, right? Your child has a knowledge of that. You may need to spend a little bit of time so they know the vocabulary and the terminology, but they get a visceral understanding of it. And so, there's absolutely a place for people becoming experts in that, right? Botanists are hard to come by today. If you want a field where you get a job, no matter what comes, go into botany, which is crazy thing to say, right? But I was talking to somebody and I think it was a former Online Academy student. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this, but majoring in botany, and colleges are looking for these people because people can tell you all day long about, this biology of the cells and, all of that sort of thing. But to actually be able to identify a plant, very few people can do that anymore.
Sure. Yeah. I can't figure out what kind of grass I have, and that would be very helpful.
One of the most fascinating days of my life was going to a field day. I think they're free, but it was a farmer's field day for pasture management if you have cows. And one of the things we learned was like 3 or 4 different kinds of grass. And I was like, what? And my wife and I went walking out of there, and we're driving down the road, and she's like, Johnson grass. We were just so excited to know what different kinds of grass.
Sure. So farming has shaped you. You can identify grass now and all these other things you've talked about.
Some kinds of grass. There are so many kinds of grass. But anyway, yes.
How has classical ed shaped you? And do you see parallels between the way classical ed has shaped you and the way farming is shaping you? Do they run alongside of each other? What's the relationship between the person forming nature?
That's a good question. I'd say number one, classical education is the reason I'm a farmer. And I've told this story before to some people, but it's worth repeating. I was on a panel and we were asked, what is a book that has changed your life? And my answer to that at the time was Anna Karenina, which, by the way, is not the best novel ever written. That's Count of Monte Cristo. But Anna Karenina did change my life. And because of the section of Levin mowing the field. And as Levin mows the field, it seems interminable. And that's the beauty of living on a farm, right? Things are slow. And you can just rest in that slowness, right? And in that, as I read that passage, and then later on, spoiler, as Levin comes to faith, that moment on his field mowing his peasants is crucial for his conversion. And I thought, as I seek to be a follower of Christ, that's one way in my life. I'm not saying every Christian has to be a farmer, right? What I am saying, though, is that in my life, I realized as I was reading Anna Karenina because of classical education, and here it was leading me to look at my life and say, you know what? Maybe city life isn't the best for me. And then shortly thereafter, I read Jayber Crow. And while maybe not in the Western canon yet, it was hugely influential for me to be able to see a world outside of a metropolis, and the community that's involved there, and the desire for small community, not large community. And so and those were direct. I was reading those books directly because I was involved in classical education. And, as I did that, I realized, well, I can't let my body be in discord with my soul. I can't let my lifestyle be in discord with, what I truly believe is true and good and beautiful. And so that classical education is largely why I'm a farmer. So there is no conflict because one led me to the other. Yeah. And what was interesting to me, this was very fascinating. This is before I had a desire to farm. I think I was at a conference, and this actually brings technology into it. And Andrew Kern comes up to me and says, "Hey, can you help me out?" I'm like, "Sure." What? He's like, "I've got this presentation on a computer, and I can't figure out how to make." I forget. It was like making a circle around some other graphic on his presentation, and I looked at it a little bit and I was like, "I don't think you can do that, but here's a different way we can do it." And I figured it out for him, and he looks at me and he goes, "Did you grow up on a farm?" And it was very interesting how in his mind, problem solving on a computer and being a farmer went hand in hand.
Yep.
And I was like, not really. I mean, no, I lived in town. We had a garden. And he said, people that grow up on farms seem to have a knack for problem solving. But I thought, well, isn't that what we're going for in classical education, right? To be able to teach kids how to think. And again, I think that's the incarnational aspect of it, right? You learn how to problem solve with your hands. And what we're trying to do in the academic sphere, and I want to make a distinction between academic and education, right? What we're trying to do in the academic sphere is do that in problem solve in an intellectual way, and because education for me involves both of these things, right? In the Online Academy, we don't pretend to be education. We pretend to be academics, right? We espouse a classical education view, but that requires a partnership where that embodiment is happening in the home.
So on that point, we have a few minutes left. You're talking to me, probably other people who don't live on farms, but who really resonate with what you're saying and want to be formed as people and have our bodies be formed. What do you recommend are the ways that someone like me can learn to do things and to find ways to engage with that part of being human?
That's a good question. And I think, the major thing would be just think about what can I do with my hands, right? If you live in an apartment and you have a balcony, right? Get 4 or 5 pots, grow different things, research, with your kids, pollinating, right? I was having a conversation recently about 2 different kinds of trees, cherry trees that they cross-pollinate. And so to really get one to work, you need the other, right? You can research those sorts of things. And just have a pot, right? My wife and I bought three, I think it was 3 blueberry plants. Lindy got into them multiple times. Now we're down to 1.
Come on, Lindy.
It's not only her fault. We kind of didn't water them for a while, And so, but, now that's in our sunroom, right? And it's something for us to contemplate and say, okay, how do we get this thing to grow? And it's fascinating exposition also of what's out of your control, right? Get a pet, right? We're going over rabbits. I want to have meat rabbits. I like rabbit meat. Sounds great to me. Chris Hall, who's an instructor in the Online Academy, he's got rabbits and he's pushing me like, you need to do meat rabbits. We're thinking about a rabbit as a pet, but having something that, you need to feed, you need to care for. It creates responsibility. But also, like, if something goes haywire, you may not have, let's say that rabbit's kept in a cage, right? You may not have a second cage ready when that rabbit bites through the mesh or whatever. Well, okay, let's problem solve. Let's find something. You can do that in a way, even when you don't have acres to do things like this, right? What's the small thing? So, get some potted plants, which honestly, I always thought my wife was a little bit crazy having all these potted plants around the house. And now I see the value, right? If you have pets, if you're a homeowner and, something breaks, research it, give it a shot first, right? Everything that we can do to actually get our hands, and they can be those small things. That's where I started was, I bought a fixer upper and I asked experts. I wanted to rip out a wall. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Went to my uncle and he went and he looked and he's like, okay, you need to support here. You need a support beam. And he kind of tries to explain it to me. And I look at him just with wide eyes. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, I'll come. Tell me what Saturday. We'll do it together. Right. There's so many people out there that are willing to do that and just ask around, because so many people that have these abilities are just dying for opportunities to share them. And there's actually, if you do happen to be a listener that wants a farm, there are a lot of farmers getting older that are looking for somebody to take over their farm. There are a lot of possibilities like that. And they're thirsting to teach you, right? And even if it's like, I don't want your farm, but I want the experience. I want somebody to come to show my kids what it's like raising a cow. I'd be like, come on out, right? Because we are social creatures, and any sort of chance to talk to the future generation about this is what I do is really, really heartwarming to a lot of people. And so even if you live in town, if you can find, again, ways to do it in your own house, small ways, but then if you can just look for community programs. My father planted a few fruit trees, and then he was like, I don't know how to prune these. And he found a place in South Louisville. It was put on by the extension service. And there was a guy that was going to teach you how to prune fruit trees.
Yeah.
You may not have a fruit tree to prune, but it would be fun to go out there and prune them with them and learn what you're doing.
Right.
Right. And so all of those sorts of small ways, and it doesn't have to be agricultural. It can be handyman kind of stuff, replace a light switch. It can be baking, right? All of that sort of stuff. We live in a world where so many people don't know how to cook their own food anymore. Right. And that was also something that drove me to farming too, is I want good food. It's amazing how healthy food tastes good.
Right.
So anyway.
Well, Paul, this has been fun. Next time on location at Paul's farm. Is that okay?
Yeah. As long as we can follow me around with a camera, I'll show you the bees. I'll show you the chickens. I'll show you, where we hunt, all of those things. And closing story. I know y'all want to wrap this up. I think probably it was what really drove me to wanting to raise animals for food was the experience of hunting. And you may need to cut this. This may be a little too visceral. But I had kind of had this dream of I want to go hunt. I didn't grow up hunting, and I thought, I'd like to do it. So my father-in-law was like, yeah, I'll go out hunting with you. And we were going out hunting on my parents' land. And we went out several times together, never got a thing. Then he goes off to Minnesota for Thanksgiving. And we were supposed to go to Thanksgiving too. And my wife became ill. And so she wasn't ill enough that I had to stay home. She's like, yeah, go hunting, have fun. So I go hunting that morning. Up comes a buck, 8-point buck. I shoot it, goes down. And I'm like, what do I do now? Right. And in this moment, right, where I've problem solved, right. And granted, I had YouTubed how to gut a deer before I did it because I wasn't sure what I was doing. But the experience of taking a live animal and removing organs, cutting it up for meat, taught me respect for that animal, and I knew where my food came from, but I knew in sort of like the Shio understanding in Latin, right? Like, but you don't conosco, right? Conoscere, like that I really know. And this was like a visceral experience with as I pulled those entrails out, and it was still so warm. And again, I'm sorry, you may have to cut this. But it was a visceral, like I am part of the world. Yeah. And I remember talking to a counseling professor about it. Yeah, I said I needed counseling. So we were just out for dinner. And it was a couple weeks after, and I said, it was the most humanizing experience I ever had. And he said, wait. You have to explain it. What do you mean by it's humanizing? And I said, all of a sudden, I had lived my entire life in an artificial world. And all of a sudden, I was a part of the cosmos. I was a part of the creation that God put me in, and not only put me in, but made me a part of, right? We're in this as humans, we're in this special place between God, who has an immortal, we have immortal souls, and he asks us to participate in his life, but yet we are viscerally human, right? I mean, we're part of creation, and melding those two things. I mean, that's precisely this idea that we're trying to do in the online academy, try to bring it around full circle. Yeah. We are trying to do mind, partnering with parents for body, but realizing we're all one human person that's part of the world, right? And that's the life I'm trying to.
Yeah, it inspired me. I've enjoyed kind of watching you on the journey the last few years, and thanks for sharing with us.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and I hope I can come back.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Memoria Press Podcast. If you like what you heard and you would like to hear more, please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever else you get your podcasts. My name is Shane Saxon, and I'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Memoria Press Podcast Network, providing a classical Christian perspective on the world of education.